You know, I don't think I'll ever get sick of hearing that music. That's my favorite intro music.
Isn't that the best?
Yeah, absolutely.
I find myself, because it's just,
like saying, you know, the great show is going to happen.
It jazzes me up, man. Yeah. I love it. Yeah. Hey, Noah Lugeons, welcome, my friend.
Hey, Dave, thanks for having me on, man. Been really looking forward to this.
Me too. We've been planning this a while. Ethan, thanks for stepping in. Folks, you'll notice the G part of that GD show is not with us tonight. That stands for Genevieve and Dave and nothing else.
If it stood for anything else, the G part wouldn't be here either. So.
Oh, boom, boom. Off the bat with the puns. I love it. Yeah, you're right. The G part never shows up.
No.
Ethan steps in last minute. Thank you, Ethan. Ever the consummate pro, producing the show in the background and on the screen as well. But welcome back in, everybody. Really happy to be here again every week. Genevieve was sorry she couldn't be here tonight. She had some other things she had to tend to tonight. But looking forward to this show with the Scathing Atheist. And we're going to talk about all of that in just a minute. Little housekeeping, as we always do each week. If you haven't subscribed yet to this channel, what the hell, really? Seriously, subscribe, like, all the things. It helps us in ways I don't understand. Also, if you like what we do and you want to support us, Patreon is a great way to do that. We appreciate all the support that we have each week and each month. So thanks for that. It's a call-in show. We'd love to hear from you tonight. If there's something you've always wanted to ask the Scathing Atheist and haven't been able to, tonight's your chance. Yep, this is it. Because he told me before the show that anything goes. There's nothing off limits.
Well,
so
I know Noah and I will definitely get along great because we're both cat people. So
yeah, we talked about that backstage too. They got cats crawling around everywhere. But that number to call is 217-375-9933 or WWDD. What would Dave do? It's the question on everyone's mind all the time. And our trivia question, we don't ever want to miss that. You can win that GD show mug. There it is. What a beauty. Each week we do a trivia question from my book. If you haven't read the book, it's motivation to get the book and read it. That way you can win the mug. So tonight's question is a little bit of a deep dive. In the book, I talk about a mission trip, my first mission trip. And by the way, disclaimers, if you've won a mug before, you can't win again. And if you live out of the North American continent, our merch supplier doesn't ship to Europe or Australia. We've had people over there win, and sorry, we can't send you a mug. But anyway, get the answer in the chat first, and you are tonight's winner. Noah's got his book out. The first mission trip I went on, I went with a group from my church, and we went to an orphanage and built a school for an orphanage. What country did I go to? What was my first mission trip country destination?
Do you know it, Noah?
I think I know it. But
if you could put it in the private chat if you know it, Noah, and we could also give you one. And man, if you know that off the top, just having read the book, I'm pretty impressed.
If I have it wrong though, then you're like doubly unimpressed.
You're wrong.
Oh, wrong. I am wrong.
Okay. We'll keep an eye on that chat. Ethan, watch that for you. What country was the first? Was the first place I went on a mission trip, and you can win that beautiful GD Show mug. Greg Markowski, first out of the gate every week with that super chat. Thank you for your support, Greg. $19.99. Thanks for the show, Dave. You're welcome. Thank you. I see a guess in the chat that is wrong, but a good guess, Kim Possible. That's also in the book, but it wasn't the first place I went. So
see, that was the second guess I had too.
I know, right? Because
me and you both, Kim.
Yeah, so it's not a bad guess. We did last week. Noah, we did. There's another guess, close but no cigar. My first car. My God, we had so many cars.
We got a winner.
We have a winner.
All right. Duke, so what you want to do?
I was so close.
You were.
Dave Warnock on Facebook and give him your address. Let him know you won, and he'll be able to get you that GD Show mug.
Well done, Duke. Thank you, brother. Oh, that's fun. Okay, we got that out of the way. Noah had guessed Russia too.
I was going to just start listing countries alphabetically there. I would have gotten there pretty quick. It was a B, right?
B, yeah. You could have started Australia, Austria, Azerbaijan. It would have been a while.
Albania, Angola.
Albania.
There's a lot of A's.
Antarctica. It would have been bad. So Noah, welcome. It's a real pleasure to have you on the show. I've been a big fan of yours for a long time. We got to meet a couple of months ago at the American Atheist Conference in Atlanta. How was that? It was awesome. Yeah, we had a great time. We actually had our tables across the way from each other. So you had a big crowd at your table the whole time. Yes, I don't know what was that going on? Were you giving out drugs? What?
Well, I think my lawyer would advise me not to answer that question, Dave. The thing is that I feel like when you go to a conference, part of it is to hear the talks and to do the workshops and to do the community service. That's always a part of these things. But a big part of it, I think, is that like when you do a podcast, when you do a YouTube show, when you do the kind of content that you and I do, it's like you're having a conversation where you never shut up and let the other guy talk, right? In a very real way. And those conferences are the opportunity for the other guy to talk.
Yeah.
So when we go to those conferences, I try to make myself as available as possible and like make everybody as welcome as I can make them and let them hang out for a bit and turn this parasocial relationship into a real relationship. It just kind of gives people a place to congregate if we do it right, in between the talks that they wanted to see.
I agree totally. Yeah.
Does it ever get overwhelming at all? Because for instance, I have bad social anxiety. So if I'm in a crowded group for too long, I'm like, and I got to get out of it. How are you in those situations?
I'm with you there. I feel like, it was a lot easier when I was a smoker, because then I had an opportunity to every half hour or so say, I need to walk away from this. But my co-hosts, and I have brilliant and incredible co-hosts in Heath Enright and Eli Bosnick, and they're always there with me. And they understand that they're both much more social people than I am. And they understand that I need to get away from that from time to time. So they're really good about that. And I find that an awful lot of the people who attend these conferences also have crippling social anxiety. And so they don't, a lot of them don't stay that long anyway. So, but I was a kids entertainer for years and years. I was a juggler. I did a lot of bar mitzvahs and stuff like that. And I'm used to having a big crowd of people around me. And when those people are 8 and 9 years old, it's way harder than when they're grown adults that are understanding. So I feel like I played the game on hard and now I'm playing it on easy.
I wish I would have known that you did juggling. I would have compelled you to do it. Next time we see each other at a conference, you better bring your juggling balls.
Oh, you bet.
That'd be awesome, man. There's a certain art to that. That's cool. Well, you really, I noticed that is something I noticed at that conference, because I was literally sitting across the aisle from you and I just had a view of your table the whole time, and you just had a crowd of people all the time. And it's just, I thought, wow, I thought that was cool that you were interacting with your fans that way. I agree. What you said, I think I noticed was when people did come by and they wanted to get a picture or to sign a book or just to say hello. It wasn't like they wanted to sit down and discuss, something deep and long. They just wanted a couple of minutes, and that's, to me, that's very valuable. And I agree with you, Noah. That's probably the best part of the conferences for me, is interacting with people that maybe you've known them online and you've never met them in person, or people that will tell you that your work has meant a lot to them and they want to come by and tell you that. It's really precious. And I really enjoy that part of it more so than almost anything else. We're doing a conference in Nashville this weekend, and I've got
NanoCon.
NanoCon, yeah.
I wish I was able to go and see all you guys.
Yeah, me too.
It's going to be a blast. I just heard today that they sold out, so it's going to be a big crowd.
Oh, nice.
But I've had people message me and say, I'm going to be in Nashville, looking forward to meeting you, that kind of thing. And so I just think that's just pretty amazing. I think it's the best part of these things. The talks are great too, but you can get a talk online. Let's just be honest,
Right.
So,
well, I think one of the really cool things about it too, and you'll see this like in your comment section and stuff like that, is that people also coalesce around the show. They coalesce around the entertainment that they enjoy. And so what we found, as often as not, they weren't talking to us at all, but rather they were talking to the other people that were listeners to the show that they've interacted with on our Facebook group or through Twitter or through some other venue. And so it's an opportunity for that community that normally exists online to show up, in person and actually meet each other.
Exactly. Yeah. Like people in the chat, you'll see a community form in the chat room in the comment section, and people get to know each other in the chat room, and then they get to meet in person. And it's just really, really special. There's Kim Possible with that Antichrist 666 donation. I figured Noah would appreciate that. And Kim is one of them that's going to be in Nashville this weekend. So looking forward to seeing Kim and her husband. So
it is, I will say it is rewarding. Like when you get to meet, like when I met you, Dave, like that was such like a dream come true, because, I was a fan of yours. I was just a person sitting, just watching these shows, and then getting to interact with all you guys and become friends with you guys has definitely been a pretty cool life experience. But meeting all the moderators and call screeners and all the people that just watch our shows, it's just, it makes you feel good about what you do. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it brings that human element to it. When you're interacting with a human across the table from you or across the chair, and you get to hug a neck and shake a hand and look in their eyes. It's just really special. So
it's also, it's something that we do sitting in a room by ourselves most of the time.
Yeah.
And it helps to be reminded that there is, we all know that there are eyes on the other side of the screen, that there are ears on the other side of the headphone, but like, it's nice to be reminded to have that filled out with an actual human being from time to time. It really helps to remind you why you do what you're doing.
Exactly. Yeah. That human element. Absolutely. Ellie is another Antichrist donation. We're going to hell tonight, guys. We are going to hell. But we'll all have a good time there. The Scathing Atheist. The definition in the dictionary of scathing is witheringly scornful, severely critical. Here we've got Ethan. You'll see, Noah, that Ethan's YFNA. Ethan is your friendly neighborhood atheist. We've got Seth, who's the thinking atheist. We've got Hemet Mehta, who's the friendly atheist. I guess I would be called the dying atheist. I don't know. But if I had to have a title, we went there, didn't we? I'm dying out loud. That's my thing. So
that's true.
Right? So we could. It's not too far of a stretch. So scathing. What are you so angry about, Noah?
Boy, I'll tell you what, man. It's pretty easy to find something to be angry about. People always say to me, like, have you calmed down over time? Because there's usually this thing where, like, when you first become an atheist, when you first leave religion, or you first, your atheism calcifies you. Maybe you didn't believe before, but now you suddenly realize that the damage, and you become an atheist activist. There's usually this period of anger and resentment and where you just want to lash out at religion.
Right.
And then usually that calms down over time, and people become a little bit more, I guess, cerebral in their approach to things, or so I'm told.
In theory.
Yeah, that's the theory anyway. I haven't found that to be the case, because what happened for me is, as I started to calm down over the slights that religion had against me, I came to inherit the slights that religion had given to all these other people, all these listeners to the show, right? Like, it used to be that the listeners were an outlet for my anger, and now in a lot of ways they're the source of it, right? I get these emails constantly about, here was my experience in church. Here's what I was told when I had doubts. Here's what I was told when I was abused. Here's what I was told when I was raped. Here's what I was told when I was pregnant, et cetera, et cetera. And man, I'll tell you, it's real easy to be scathing when those are the stories you hear over and over again.
Right.
That's a really good point. And I guess I would have to say my experience was probably similar, because I've been an atheist for about a dozen years now. And I went through that angry stage pretty quickly and just kind of moved on through it. Hello, Derek Cruz. Thank you, buddy, for your super chat, $2. Thank you, guys. But yeah, as I got to meet other Christians who were coming out of that and listened to their stories and saw their trauma, it would stir that anger up in me all over again. And it like you said, that's a great point, Noah. It kind of feeds that anger, because now you're not angry for yourself. You're angry for the people who are continuing to be hurt. And you get these emails and these messages daily from people who are truly struggling to find equilibrium in their lives, to find who they are, to overcome the trauma. And yeah, it stirs me up all over again. I just get pissed off. So, yeah.
For me, it was always an academic thing personally. I was never religious. Now, you obviously have been through religion exacted a much heavier toll from you than it did from me. For me, it was, I was ostracized as a kid. I grew up in Detroit, lived there till I was about 14. Then I moved to South Georgia. Bit of a culture shock. I moved from places in the world where
places.
Yeah, right. And what I found, like, the biggest culture shock, obviously, was the increase in racism and the increase in sort of segregation of races. But then the next biggest change for me was the change in religion. The fact that even as a kid, people would ask me, like, when they first met me, what church do you go to? When my answer was none, I don't go to church, there was a certain amount of alienation. There was a certain amount of otherization that happened there. And very often it felt like coordinated, and of course I was, Detroit was one of the first places to sort of have the whole goth thing happen. We were.
Was it really?
Oh yeah. Yeah. We had the Devil's Night thing, and we had, The Crow was set in Detroit.
That's a fantastic film.
Yeah, isn't it?
Yeah. They're remaking it now.
Yeah, they have to remake every damn thing every few years, don't they? But no, maybe it'll be great. Who knows? You put it in the right hands. I mean, the Top Gun sequel was good, so who the hell knows?
Oh, it was phenomenal.
There are no rules anymore. Anything can be good. It was really good.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it.
Good. It was unexpectedly good.
It was phenomenal.
Yeah,
I went in with high expectations based on all the reviews, and I was still surprised by how good it was. But the point is that I came to, when I moved to South Georgia, I wore black eyeliner and ripped up clothes, and I had long hair. I haven't changed my haircut since like 1985. This is how I always I've worn my hair, and so I was like, I was a Satanist. This was 1990 was the year I moved down to Georgia. So this was sort of the tailing end of the satanic panic, but very much alive at that point, especially in rural South Georgia. But that was the only price I paid. I had an even more awkward, few years as a teenager than I otherwise would have had as a person with a different accent who was from a different place. And that was enough to fire me up to the point where I'm like, well, I need to do a podcast about how mistreated I've been at the hands of religious people. And then, of course, once you start doing it, you start following the the news from atheist sources, from people like Hemant Mehta that you mentioned earlier, and you start to see like the real toll that religion takes on people. Or you read books like yours, Dave, and you find out the kind of things that people have to endure because of religion.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like, wow, if what I went through was enough to sustain a podcast, and man, what these other people are going through has to be plenty of fuel.
Right.
Yeah. Ethan experience. You came out of pretty fundamentalist religion, didn't you, Ethan?
More so conservative Christianity, yes, but more so political indoctrination. Like at 12 years old, I was handed my first Limbaugh letter and was like, here, you need to read this.
Oh my God.
I'll put it to you like this. Embarrassingly, I was originally a Trump supporter.
Yeah. Wow.
Wow.
It got until the month beforehand when I was like, yeah, I can't vote for this fucking guy. And like, I started putting the pieces together, left the Republican Party, and then now I'm,
Were you still a Christian then?
No. So I became an atheist first.
I see.
Because of people
but still
like
conservative.
and Jenna, but yeah, it took a while for that political conservative indoctrination to go away.
Wow.
I held definitely a lot of idiotic and harmful beliefs. That's for sure. I look at some of my old Facebook memories of my political rants, and I'm just
embarrassing. Yeah.
Yes, it is. It's like, dude, what were you thinking? You're such an idiot.
Stop it, Facebook. Stop reminding me of that shit.
But and you'll find transphobic stuff too. I used to be transphobic. I've never hidden that. But like, so I personally, like, I'll never take posts. I don't want to take posts from the past down, because I want people to see, like, okay, look,
you can change.
Change. People can change, and we just need to find the right way, in my opinion, to get through to them.
Well, I think that's why we do what we do here, because we changed. We know that people watching and listening can change, are looking for answers. They're asking questions, and I'm prone to look at someone like my evangelical pastor brother, and say, well, he'll never change his mind. There's no way. Really? I did. I mean, anyone can, given the right set of circumstances, the right communication, enough communication in the right way. Anyone can change their mind about something. If we didn't think that, we wouldn't be doing this.
Yeah.
I mean, that's how I see it. I'm sure you do too, Noah. You've been doing it a lot longer than I have. I mean, how long have you? Yeah. How long?
I believe we're going to be 10 years in January. So we're well into our 9th year of podcasting. And, to launch off that point that you made, Ethan, of not taking down your old Facebook posts, I feel the same way about a lot of our early shows. Right. So I was already an atheist. I was politically liberal. But I was prone to make jokes at the time that we started that I would never make now, right? Jokes that were transphobic or homophobic, or, in the same way that I went into this hoping to help change the minds of the audience, a lot of the audience went into it hoping to change my mind as well. That relationship works in both directions. And I think because I've been gifted with some very patient listeners and some very patient tutors, I've learned to be a better person because of what I do. And there are, the jokes that I made, and I don't know that there's anything, if there was something that terribly egregious that somebody came to me and said, hey, this really hurt me when I heard it or whatever, I think I might consider taking that down. But like, just jokes that, like, again, I wouldn't make today. I leave them up now because I think it is an important record of, it's an important record of, like you said, that people can change. And that there is a benefit in reaching out to him and saying, hey, this isn't acceptable, or you should find another way of phrasing this or whatever. But also because I don't want to run away from who I was and thereby cheapen who I am. I don't want to pretend that I was never this way,
Right, exactly.
That's good. That's really important, I think. I appreciate that too. By the way, folks, we've got lines open if you want to join the conversation. The number is 217-375-9933. Call and talk to the Scathing Atheist. He's really nice, I promise.
So it depends on the circumstance, but yeah.
That's true.
Do you guys get as disappointed as I do when you're talking to an atheist and then you find out they're a Republican and you're just like, oh man?
Well, kind of, yeah. What do you think, Noah? I mean, that's a good point, Noah. Ethan.
Yeah, I don't encounter that very often. I do look. I occasionally will be talking to an atheist and then become really disappointed when I realize that they're not a rationalist. You know, I come across that an awful lot where, you know, you're talking to somebody about, you know, oh, you know, the Bible, it's obviously nonsense, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, so this homeopathic remedy I've been taking is just doing wonders for my, you know, or something like that. I did a talk a couple of weeks ago in Florida. I did this talk about grieving as an atheist. And the point of the talk by and large was, look, we know that there's no afterlife, and we have to admit that. We have to say that out loud. Obviously, you know, so a message I think Dave could get behind. I actually talked about you specifically in the talk. And I had this guy come up to me afterwards, and he gives me this whole tirade about how, like, I can't believe you said that, when obviously, if you look at all the near-death experiences that people
God,
you're just like, oh, I'm like, oh my God. He was in it. This was a small gathering. This was an atheist group that I was talking to. And, you know, so it's a reminder that, you know, sometimes we think we're preaching to the choir. We may be preaching to the choir as in we're talking to other atheists, but we're not necessarily talking to other liberals. We're not necessarily talking to other rationalists.
Yeah, that's true. Right. And you can't assume that.
Rational, that's for sure.
No, you can't assume that. And we have to keep having the conversations.
Yeah. So to give you one example where when I first found out my girlfriend was an atheist, I got all excited. But then I was like, wait a second. I'm like, I'm sorry, I got to ask you a few more questions. And I went down, I'm like, okay, homeopathy, essential oils, ghosts, the afterlife. And I went down this list. She's like, no, bullshit. No. And I was like, perfect. Even on astrology, she thinks it's bullshit. So I was like, that's awesome.
So Noah, you've been doing it almost 10 years. And it's, if not the largest atheist podcast out there, it's one of the largest. What do you attribute that to? What's the key to your success if you had to figure that out?
Well, I would say, you know, I honestly, a lot of it is good timing, right? Like stepping in at exactly the right moment. There weren't, you know, when we started podcasting, it was like, oh, you know, it's going to be very difficult for us to break into this market. Why there are almost dozens of other atheist podcasts out there.
Dozens.
There were very few, you know,
right.
There were maybe 15 or 20 that were coming out on a regular basis. So, you know, but also, you know, there were also a lot of shows that had showed up before then and had petered out by then, because before about 9-10 years ago, it was very hard to monetize a podcast in any meaningful way. You know, it was before there was Patreon. That's before there were a few advertisers that were working with podcasts, but it was all very difficult. You had to have a really large audience. I don't think most advertising companies had really started to recognize the value and, you know, sort of the parasocial relationship you have with podcasters yet. So we got in right before that, the ability to monetize a podcast showed up as well. So I think that allowed that, you know, because that sort of allowed us to hit the not too early and the not too late sweet spot.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond that, I think it's all about consistency. You know?
Yeah.
We have had a show out every Thursday morning at 7 a.m. every week since we started. We've never missed a week. The show is 60 minutes long, not a minute less, not a minute more. Started off as a 30-minute bi-weekly show. It's moved up to an hour-long weekly show. And we give the audience what we tell them we're going to give them. You know, I think that's an awful lot of it. I think the, you know, the commit, I tell people who ask me about, you know, who are interested in going into podcasting, you know, if you give them one piece of advice, what would it be? And it's to always frame the question, is my audience worth X? You know, because you'll find a perfect example from just today. I was going back through an edit. I'd already converted the file to MP3. I'd already uploaded it to the thing. And it was just like, you know, it's going to release at 7 a.m. tomorrow morning. And I noticed that I had a very, very small error where there was just this bit of trailing music that was going to overlap a part of something that somebody was saying that I didn't want. And it was just a matter of shifting the entire thing over by a fraction of a second. You know, it was this tiny, tiny little thing. And I was just about to not do it. I was just about to say, screw it. It's such a tiny problem.
Yeah.
Right. But I remembered that was always sort of my axiom, was to phrase it, is my audience worth shifting this over just a little bit, reconverting the entire file to MP3 and re-uploading it to the host site. And of course, when you phrase it like that, the answer is always yes, right? You always say, of course, they're worth it. Of course, they're worth that, extra 7 minutes that I'm going to have to work now to make that tiny little correction and make sure that the product I put out for them is as good as it can be.
Well, that shows a lot of respect for your audience, to be honest. I mean,
yeah, it absolutely does.
Yeah, and that's why you have a loyal audience that you've built over the years. You say you got into it. You started the podcast back almost 10 years ago because you were, I not want to say upset at how not mistreated. I'm struggling for the words here, but you saw that you didn't fit into that Bible Belt mentality, and you were going to speak up about that. Is that correct in saying a summary?
Yeah, more or less. I think by the time I started the show, I had moved on from the Bible Belt. I was living in New York City at the time, and I was seeing different types of religious oppression from different religions. There's a lot of religious diversity in New York City. Of course, you think of it as very cosmopolitan. That also means that there are a lot of extraordinarily conservative religious people,
Hasidic Jews, and
and Muslims, very observant Muslims, and just sects that the average person couldn't. I don't know what religion that is, but so I was sort of exposed to a lot of that and sort of realized a little bit more that these same problems exist for everybody regardless of their religion. But yeah, it was that same thought process that sent me down that road.
Yeah. So
have you ever gotten burnt out of it at any point?
Man, during the I'd say about 3 years into the Trump administration, when every week it was more of like, we're losing a fight that we won 20 years ago. We're opening up a tomb that we buried in concrete, 3 sequels ago or whatever. It got really hard there for a little while. It got really hard because, my show starts off with a diatribe where I do a little monologue about whatever's big in the news at the moment. And what that's come to mean for a lot of the audience is that Noah is going to express my anger for me.
Yeah.
And that got really hard to do. It got really hard to find new ways of saying, oh shit, look where we are now.
Right.
So yeah, that there was definitely a time when I really wish that I had started a podcast about history or video games or something, anything but atheism.
Not as emotionally exhausting as that has become. I think what you're saying to me, what I'm hearing is how, for me personally, how discouraging the last few years have been in thinking we were further along than we clearly are. Realizing that it feels like we've stepped back in time in terms of progress as a species, as humanity, with basic human rights. And it's even, the Trump era was worse, but here we are now with this Supreme Court running wild and trampling over basic human rights. And I'm thinking, I don't know, how do we get out of this? Where do we go from here? And how bad is it going to get? And so I wanted to ask you this, Noah. I've been looking forward to picking your brain about this because I think you've got your finger on the pulse, probably as well as anyone I know in the atheist community. What do you see? How do you feel about those questions personally?
I mean, it's a pretty scary place. I think I speak for a lot of people when I say it's a scarier place than I ever expected to be politically.
Mm-hmm.
And I, as much as I hate to say it, I think it's going to get worse before it gets better. I have high hopes for the midterms, but everybody in the know seems to think that things are going to go badly for the Democrats. And who knows what 2024 holds, right? So I think it's going to get a lot worse before we turn the corner on it. Honestly, I don't think we're there, and I think that so many of us when we started the show, Barack Obama had just been was just being inaugurated for a second term, right? And there were people who were like, legitimately people in the atheist community going like, well, how much longer are we even going to need atheist shows? It'll be meaningless to say because so much of it, all the problems will be fixed and all the, we'll have won all of these battles. And that was a realistic, like one of the first interviews I ever set up on the show, and it ended up falling through, but it was with another atheist podcaster who was making that argument that, we were all going to have to hang up our spurs because there would be no one left to fight.
No way.
Our work is done here. Right.
Yeah.
That would be nice.
We would be Alexander the Great weeping for there were no more worlds to conquer. And that was really the feeling. And I think that has exacerbated the problem, right? Because people thought, we were hanging up our spurs and retiring, so to speak, moving on to the next. And that's, it's too dismissive to say that. I think people were saying that they were hanging up their spurs for this fight and then picking up some new spurs for a different fight, whatever. I've screwed my analogy all the way up at this point. But the point is, as we were saying, like, all right, so now let's move on to trans rights, say. What we found was we were being dragged all the way back to what about contraception, though? And for all of us who thought that these fights were over, it's all the more depressing and it's all the harder to maintain the kind of stick-to-itiveness that we're going to need to continue this fight. I mean, think about, contrast where we are, where the left is, where atheists are, where people who, let's just restrict ourselves to the subject of abortion, right? People who are in favor of reproductive rights, where we are compared to where the religious people are, right? They grew up in a world where this was a perpetual fight that they were willing to die and never making any real advancement on it, just knowing that they had to help to try to save the life of one unborn baby or whatever. And we thought this was a fight that was won back in the 70s.
Right.
And so for us to try to shift gears now to actually fighting this fight again, it's really hard for us to find the motivation, whereas they have motivation to spare at this point.
Yeah. Did we fall asleep at the wheel? Did we get complacent?
I think a lot of it was that. Yeah, I think that's how Trump wound up in office, was just complacency on the left. People saying like, well, with Barack Obama, I was inspired and I really liked the guy and I wanted to have a beer with him. Hillary was not, she was a little bit more of a wooden, stiff politician, blah, 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 blah. And, whatever, there are legitimate criticisms of Hillary Clinton. They pale in comparison to criticisms of Donald Trump. And it should have been a no-brainer for anybody who was even remotely left in that election to not just reject Donald Trump, but to vote for Hillary Clinton. Yeah. We didn't do that. A lot of people were like, I'm going to send a message, this, that, and the other. And in their defense, they were told by pollsters, hey, don't worry about it. There's a very low chance that he's going to win. We should be fine. The Electoral College is in our favor, yada, yada, yada. And yeah, I think it was complacency that put Trump in office. I think it was complacency, obviously, then that screwed the Supreme Court for a generation.
Yeah.
Out of curiosity, between Bernie and Biden, which way would you have gone?
I mean, if I could appoint one of them president, I think I would rather have President Bernie Sanders. But, if I was going to nominate one for the entire country to vote on, I think I would have gone with Biden. I think he's just a little more palatable to a larger group of people.
Yeah, I think complacency. I remember thinking back then we're going from, I just figured, I assumed, like you said, Noah, that pollsters told us, and I didn't think Trump had a chance. And I remember just I sat there that night in November of 2016 and just was stunned, just depressed and stunned. But I remember thinking before that, okay, we got our first Black president, check. Going to have our first woman president, check. Right. We'll probably have a gay president soon. I mean, we're on our way. We're moving forward. Yes. And I just made these assumptions. And I remember thinking, how could I have been so wrong? How could I have missed this? And just how is this country electing this buffoon? And I'm still stunned to this day at the number of people that continue to think he's a legitimate Savior. Anything, a human. I mean, he's the worst human I've seen on the public stage in my lifetime.
And I don't get how more people how it's not as obvious to more people.
I'm stunned. I don't get it.
Exactly. It's baffling. And we still get these people who idolize him. Like you still see the Trump 2024 banners or the Let's Go Brandon, which I think, if anyone's familiar with Let's Go Brandon, is probably one of the stupidest things.
It really just say fuck Joe Biden.
Exactly.
We say fuck Joe Biden.
Like,
amongst ourselves, we say, "Ah, fuck Joe Biden."
Well, but they can't do that in church. So they have these chants in church, and like they're tricking us. Oh, they don't know what we're saying.
Right. Yeah, no, it's like when they fool Jesus by referring to him as doubled eggs instead of deviled eggs or something. Yeah.
I said penis. Yeah, it's just ridiculous. I guess what's discouraging to me is that Trump didn't cause these people to be who they are. He revealed to us that there's a large number of people out there who are just really awful people, racist and Christian nationalist, fascist. It's obvious that they're among us and in numbers that we couldn't have dreamed of. And it's discouraging, honestly.
Well, there's a terrifying fallacy at the heart of all of it, that I think we all go through life, or at least we're going through life with this feeling. And no matter where you were on the political spectrum, you probably felt like deep down, most of the people in the country agreed with you and felt like you. And even if they were underrepresented in the national conversation, the majority of them felt the way that you did.
Mm-hmm.
That's certainly how I felt. I remember going to England very shortly after the Brexit vote. I was there for a conference, and this was right after Donald Trump had entered the race, right after the golden elevator escalator nonsense. Where he said that Mexicans were rapists for the first time. Well, I'm certainly not for the first time, but for the first time as a presidential candidate. And he was polling real well. And everybody said, I was picking on them for Brexit because that's such a stupid thing to do. And they're like, oh, don't say anything. Donald Trump is leading in the polls. And I kept telling them, like, but nobody's voted yet. It's not, come on, are you kidding me? We would never do. As bad as America is, we're not that dumb. Come on.
Yeah, right.
We are that dumb.
And it's I think we pulled a veneer off of the racism that's in this country, inherently embedded in our race. And I see a comment there that says he and I agree with Nicole, he gave people permission to pull the cover off their hate and racism and be openly outward about it. Mm-hmm. In East Tennessee, there was a Tennessee congressional campaign concurrent with the Make America Great campaign, where this guy literally, you guys may remember this, put up billboards that said, "Make America White Again."
Yep.
He said the quiet parts out loud, and it didn't last long. They took him down, but a lot of people were cheering him on. And so we just have to acknowledge that this country has a deep bed of racism running through it. And it's sad to have to admit that, but it is what it is. Let's take a call, guys.
I was just going to ask that. Yep.
Yeah, we've got Rich, him in New York. Hello, Rich.
Hello, how you doing, guys?
Good to have you on. You're on with... what's your question?
Just real quick. This is becoming one of my favorite shows, but
thank you.
As an atheist, and even as a black atheist, you guys just hit on a lot of things. But how do we get the atheist humanist side of the political coin to galvanize together? I think a lot of our issues are because we fail to see the bigger picture. I remember just talking to all of my progressive friends about Hillary and the danger of what not voting for Hillary was going to do, and it came to fruition. Mm-hmm. Now, also, I just want to touch on some of the things about the racism. I think, as a black person, once Obama was elected, I always felt there was going to be this ridiculous backlash. Mm-hmm. He brought out something. There was one thing. This country has always been able to say, even Martin Luther King, you have black leaders. He's a great black leader. But Obama was the first one that they couldn't say that. Yeah. And they pissed him off so much, they said this will never happen again. It doesn't matter who they get on the right. I mean, you even look at this idiot in Florida who I support veterans, but to say that veterans can be teachers, even if they don't have degrees just because they're veterans, all this type of crap going around in this country. But I think it's a huge failure on the left, us not being stock, in line just like the Republicans. The Republicans figured it out years ago, and we need to figure it out. We got to get rid of nuance. That's just one thing I really think.
What do you think, guys? Noah, how do we get the atheist/humanist movement, if you will? I hate to call it a movement, but you know what I mean, the community. How do we get us more unified? Because they are working as a team, not only the Christian nationalists, but the Republican as a whole.
Yeah.
What do you think?
How do we herd those cats, right? Yeah. Isn't that the $64 million question? Yeah. Well, first of all, Rich, thanks for calling in and offering your perspective. Because honestly, I think, it was one of our biggest issues was that we were not listening to Black voices that were telling us that this backlash was going to exist, right? And I think had we done that, we might have recognized what a dire circumstance we were in vis-a-vis Donald Trump and his election possibilities back in 2016. But to the credit of the atheist community, I think that I think that we're coming around to it. We're realizing that there really is a existential threat. I said on my show very recently after the that most recent spate of Supreme Court decisions, as bad as obviously as the Dobbs decision was, it was really easy to let that overshadow all the other terrifying church-state separation issues that came out at the same time, right? All of the guy praying or leading the students in prayer at the football games and all that nonsense. And I said, for the first time, I'm actually legitimately afraid that it may become illegal to do my show. It might be illegal to do what we're doing now in our lifetimes. Yeah. And Dave, in your lifetime, like that could happen in the next Supreme Court session.
To make what?
To make it illegal to
have an atheist show?
Yeah, to enact some kind of blasphemy laws that's going to make it illegal for us to offend religious sensibilities like they have in so many other parts of the world. Like I wouldn't be crazy. Yeah, but that's not, like, given what we've seen out of this Supreme Court, how far could we really be from that? And I think that as much
but the Christians are being persecuted, Noah. That.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. The most terrifying thing that came out of that spate of Supreme Court decisions, in my opinion, wasn't even the overturning of Roe versus Wade. It was the fact that in that decision, that Bremerton High School decision, right, Bremerton versus Kennedy, when they wrote the opinion, the majority opinion on that, they just lied. They just made shit up. Yeah, they talked about in the opening. They said in the decision, rather, they said that he was, engaged in a silent moment of prayer by himself.
A private prayer.
Right, and of course, Sonia Sotomayor is putting pictures in her minority opinion, because going like, guys, we have photographs of the fucking thing. This is not a moment of private prayer. It's nothing like that.
It's the 50 fucking yard line.
Right. With kids from his team and the other team and people from the stands running onto the field and announcing it beforehand. Do you announce private moments beforehand? I feel like by definition you don't. So that willingness to just divorce the decision from the reality of the case is probably the scariest damn thing about this Supreme Court, that it is no longer, they don't even have to have a consistent and coherent theory of the case anymore. They're just going to say whatever the hell they want and pretend the facts were what they need them to be to get there. Right. And to answer Rich's question, I think that really the only thing that's going to get us all moving in the same direction is the recognition of this very real threat, which I hope is happening right now, or at least it seems it's happening right now.
Yeah, Rich.
Another part of this that's scary is in the Dobbs decision, they said we don't have rights to privacy. A lot of people didn't realize. They said there is no right to privacy in the Constitution. That's what drove that decision.
Yeah.
If that drives that decision, is there anything that's not on the table in your private life?
Right. Exactly. Right. Was it Paxton down in Texas said, well, given that, given that decision, I would absolutely defend a sodomy law if they passed another sodomy law in Texas, like the one that led to the Supreme Court decision that got rid of those types of laws. Which was, only 20, 30 years ago. I don't remember when it was, but it was shockingly recent. But yeah, the gay marriage, the sodomy laws, contraception, interracial marriage, all of that is on the table now.
Well, Clarence Thomas famously.
I think a lot of white women who support the right think they're protected, but honestly, they're not protected because, again, this privacy law, they can use this. The people don't know how perverse that decision was. They don't understand what's at stake.
Everything, pretty much.
There's nothing sacred.
Yeah, I said after the Roe v. Wade overturn, I said, and I said here, see what you guys think if this is hyperbolic, but if the government can force you to carry a baby to term, a different government can force you to have an abortion.
I don't see why not. Once you've gotten rid of the right to privacy that undergirds the right to reproduction or the reproductive rights to begin with, I don't see how you can. Yeah. But again, it's not about even making a coherent case. They don't even need those to add up if they want to do it. Like once you've got a Supreme Court that's willing to reject facts and precedent, then yeah, literally, as you say, Dave, everything is on the table.
And it's like the Republican states changing the voting laws. They don't even care that it's obvious what they're doing is wrong. They don't even care. They're just doing it. They're gerrymandering. They're changing voting laws. They're making it harder for people of color to vote. Certain sections are becoming less voting, fewer voting places. They're just doing everything they want to right out loud in front of everybody, and they're thumbing their nose at what's legal and what's ethical. Right. They don't even care.
Yeah,
Dave, I think it's worse. I think they don't think it's wrong.
You really think that?
That's what makes it even worse. They truly don't think what they're doing is wrong. When you don't think that what you're doing is wrong, and of course, if God is on your side,
that's part of it, probably. If God, it's like the Christians who justified genocide because God commanded it.
Yeah,
I guess that's the thought, right?
I don't know where this ends. And as a black man, I think many of you have heard that in the black community, we've always been practical in this sense. We know that even if we vote for something, for the most part, it's not for us. We know that. But we push for the stuff that's usually going to give us the most. That's how we look at it. We've had to be practical politically for 200 years, probably longer than that, but at least let's say 200 years we've been able to at a bare level be part of the political landscape. And I just think a lot of my white friends don't think that's the case. They think they're okay. They think they're okay. And another thing, this whole thing, states' rights. Didn't we fight a civil war and lost 700,000 Americans over states' rights, and they're bringing this shit back?
Yeah.
Well,
I think. Oh,
go ahead,
Dave.
No, you go ahead. I was just going to say I'm depressed, but go ahead.
I put away this razor blades, and I'm not slitting my wrist.
Oh, good.
Yeah, but I think you're exactly right, Rich, and I think it's taking, and again, maybe I'm just, they accuse me of being a hopeless optimist all the time, but so maybe I'm just being optimistic when I say that we're starting to recognize the threat. But I think you're exactly right. I think there are too many people. Like I have several friends that have said, well, Biden didn't do a good enough job canceling student loan debt. He promised he was going to do that. He hasn't done enough of that. So I'm not going to vote for him again. I'm giving up on, and it's just like, look, I get that, right? That is a thing he said he was going to do. I don't, and I think it's a great deal of it was done, right? Like, it's not like he didn't do anything on the issue, but he didn't do quite as much as these people wanted. And you should hold politicians accountable for the promises that they made and broke.
Yeah,
but like the other option is so goddamn much worse than not as much student loan relief as you were hoping to get. Then why the hell would you even, how is this going to, again, I get how it might affect your willingness to vocally support and say this, that, and the other, but like you've got to get out and vote for the guy, because that's the option is either him or the other guy, not him or a more perfect version of him.
Yeah, we let perfection get in the way of what's best. We look for
exactly.
I've got to have the perfect candidate, or I'm not going to vote at all. That's just cutting off your nose to spite your face.
Right, but as Rich says, of course, the Black community has learned long ago that, hey, at a certain point, you got to take what you can get, right? Even if it's not everything that you want.
And another thing that's unfair and just unspoken is people's level of civic ignorance. This country is not run by the president. He can put everything he wants out there all he wants. But until you can get Congress to do it, it doesn't matter what he wants. He can do just so much with the executive privilege. Then you have people like Manchin who made that great move to the Democratic Party. I think, man, I thought when he did it, I remember when Manchin moved to the Democratic Party, I knew he did it to weaken the Democratic side because he was always a Republican. And it didn't matter. He was going to win in West Virginia. Mm-hmm. This now his little ego knows that because it's basically a 50-50 split.
He controls everything.
I am the man.
Yeah. He likes the power.
In many ways, he has more power than the president. And people,
anybody.
So this notion that do what he promised is sort of a bullshit notion. Yeah. And people need to wake up and they need to start looking at this. Biden can say all he wants running for the presidency. But if you're not voting for Biden and you're not voting for your House of Representatives, and if you're not voting for your senator, and if you're not voting that party line and making sure that these people are in those houses, that we can get this stuff done, Biden's not going to be able to do anything. And there's a level of disingenuousness. Maybe it's just ignorance. Because I when I ask people this question, they say, so what? It still doesn't matter. He promised. What do you mean he promised? What?
Yeah.
What?
It does matter.
I can promise you anything I want.
Right.
I try not to get depressed over this stuff.
We share your frustration and depression, but yeah, we as far as your original question, we don't really have the answer, but we're in this together, and we've got to keep looking for the answers and encouraging one another to do.
Can I make one last comment?
You bet.
It's one last one. Actually, the abortion decision might be the best thing that ever happened to us as a party and as a movement, because all of a sudden we're going to look and say we've been on high and mighty and we thought that this would never happen. It's happened. Maybe we'll get our asses out there now and do some work.
Right.
Well,
maybe we've learned a lesson the hard way.
I love your optimism, and I agree with you, except of course for any 10-year-old girl that has to carry a rapist's baby to term or whatever. You know, there's an awful lot to sacrifice there. So I don't know if I could say that it would be the best thing that ever happened to us one way or the other, but I agree with your larger point that perhaps it'll be the catalyst that actually gets us. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hopefully you're right, Rich. I've thought about that.
And by the way, what Noah just said about the 10-year-old girl that was, again, trigger warning, that was raped and had to go get an abortion in another state because the doctors were scared to perform it because it was after, I think it was like the 6-week period to where it was then illegal in that state. So yeah, a 10-year-old girl had to literally travel to who was raped to get an abortion, and it's fucking sad.
Tragic. Rich, thanks for your call.
Maybe the facts are on our side. Yep.
Yeah.
Appreciate the call, Rich. Good conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Take care, buddy. We don't have any answers, but we share the frustration and the angst that we all feel.
You know, as small as it seems, though, I think that what we're doing here, you know, just the conversation that we're having, the communities that we're helping to foster, listening to what Rich has to say and reaching out to the community and asking for their input. I think, you know, by building these communities, we are at the very least creating networks that can be used to get out the vote, that can be used to disseminate a positive political message, that can be used to pump people up when it seems like this fight is unwinnable. So, you know, to a certain degree, and I know it seems so insufficient in light of such a giant problem that we're facing, to a certain degree, creating communities is the first step to everything that we need to do to get where we want to go.
Yeah, and talking about it and continue to talk about it and trying to bring us together around things that matter and keeping the bigger picture in mind. I know I've had this subject on my mind, the dysfunction of the atheist community and how we kind of eat our own in many ways.
But
I talked about that at the American Atheist Conference.
Yeah, exactly.
That was on my mind there, and it still is, because we have to quit fighting over petty things and come together and fight the big fight, because the world is burning around us. People are losing human rights, and we're squabbling about the definition of an atheist.
Yeah, okay. That's an excellent point. I will say the one thing I really like about, I don't want to, I guess, say the atheist community, but the skeptic atheist community, is you can always count on them to hold you accountable and correct you when you've made mistakes. And
Yeah.
I prefer that, because I'd rather not regurgitate nonsense or, just whatever. It's good. Like, I remember when I posted an inaccurate statistic on circumcision, within moments my inbox was blown up with like the correct information, because I totally fucked up.
Yeah.
So
and you own it. Yeah.
you
You
know,
own it.
religion.
And and that's, there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And sorry, I want to caveat a point that you made there, Dave. You said that, we need to, that you pointed out rightly, I think, that the atheist community often divides itself over petty things. And I think there are also points where the atheist community divides itself over things that, could not fairly be dubbed as petty, things that are very, very important, right? Things that matter to a lot of people, but things that are all secondary to stuff like women having reproductive rights, or there being separation of church and state. So, in the same way that sometimes we have to hold our nose and vote for a candidate that we don't like, but that is clearly the better of the choices that are available, I think sometimes we also have to hold our noses and organize with people that we don't like, organize with people. Now, obviously, I want to say, like, there are groups of people that I will not work with, right? If you are transphobic, if you're homophobic, if you are racist, there are obviously lines that you have to draw where you say, hey, like, this person, I'm not going to, I'm not going to share a platform with. Exactly.
Let me ask you this though: where do you think the line is in terms of, like, what if you want to have that conversation with somebody who's transphobic because you want to be able to properly fight back against all their, the points they make, and you could do that in a responsible way? Like, do you think that's okay?
Absolutely. So what I'm talking about here is not whether or not we should have that conversation. If you're comfortable having that conversation, I think that's great. By all means, have the conversation. I'm talking about, who we partner with,
endorsing.
Yes. Exactly.
Yeah. I think you can disagree with someone and still join arms in ways that help the greater community, while still telling that person, I disagree with your position on this, but we need to get human rights back, and so let's work together on this topic, and then we'll fight about the other thing later. For example, or while we're doing it.
Right. For example, I have worked with Christians, in my effort to get to meet larger human rights goals, things like abortion rights and whatnot. So, if I can hold my nose and march alongside Christians, I feel like you can hold your nose and march alongside a lot of the atheists that you disagree with about other things.
All right, let's take a call from Anton in Mexico. He, him. Anton, you've got a question about Christian and atheist youth groups. Let's go there.
Hello, Dave.
Hello, Anton.
Hey, Anton.
Yeah. So I'm wondering if any of you guys know about these religious retreats, like Christian camping kind of things that are performed with young people.
Yeah, the Christian youth groups, youth camps. I'm loving Ethan's cat's tail.
Sorry. I'm not laughing at your question, Anton. The cat's over here just rolling all over the camera here. So.
Slapping Ethan in the face like, feed me, damn it. Get off.
Or Noah being in one of these.
I don't have any direct experience. I think Dave would be the person to ask on that. Dave, have you ever organized or been involved with a Christian youth camp?
Oh yeah,
yeah. Of course, you met your first wife at one of those.
I did. Yeah, I was a Christian counselor at a Christian youth camp, and those things are designed primarily to spread the gospel. And you entice the kids in with fun and games and pizza and rock music, and then you get them to pray. You get them all worked up with your hyper worship music, and you have them come forward and commit their lives to the Lord or rededicate their lives to the Lord. It's one of the most common and effective tactics in the evangelical world to get kids. The primary and youth groups do the same thing. College campus ministries. It's designed to get young people at impressionable ages gathered together and surrounded by a shit ton of peer pressure and get them won to the Lord or rededicated to the Lord. It's probably the number one, other than childhood indoctrination, it's probably the number one most effective method to gain converts for Christianity. Now, the atheist youth groups, I know that there's Camp Quest and there's some movements to get secular camps going. In fact, going to be talking with one of the leaders of that's going to be at NanoCon next weekend. Any thoughts on any of the above, Noah and Ethan?
Well, so I don't have any experience with Christian camps, but when I was a juggler, I worked at a lot of amusement parks. I was working at Universal Studios years ago, and they would have, I don't know if they still do it, but I don't remember what it was called, but it was an annual event, and it was a church event, right, where they would have big concerts. They'd have the Christian contemporary music artists would come in, and they had a little rock concert, and the kids got to stay up until midnight. Of course, these are conservative Christian kids, so the fact that they were able to do anything remotely wild and cool was way outside the norm for them.
Right.
And I saw.
Is any of you?
Yeah, Anton.
Is any of you familiar with the name Jornada Youth Group? Like,
what is it?
There's one in the.
I think you said Jornada.
Jornada.
No, I haven't heard of that.
There's one in the diocese of San Diego, I believe. Perhaps, Dave, are you familiar with the? Well, I mean, I'm asking, are you familiar with this Second Vatican Council of the 60s?
Second Vatican Council? That sounds very Catholic.
Yeah.
No, I didn't have any connection with Catholics. I didn't consider them Christians.
Oh, well, that's a bummer. Around the 60s, it was the Pope John Paul II.
Yeah.
There was this like huge worrying in the church. This is more in line with Catholics, but they were worried that a lot of people were walking away from faith. Well, more young people were, not interested in church anymore. Yeah. So there was these, right? There was this council in the Vatican in like the 60s, and one of the things that was as a result of this were these youth movements. They're not at all like the ones you're describing, but they have the same purpose, like indoctrinate people into the church. And they started like in Latin America, but they spread like all over the world. And I am part of one of these groups, but one that is not Christian. It's absolutely not religious. It's an offshoot of one of these. And the thing that I've been having trouble with lately is that the difference between the religious ones and the one that I'm part of, which I consider activism, is that I kind of see the religious ones doing a lot more good, like for example, planting trees and such and such.
I see.
So what do you think?
Well, it's very possible. I mean, I know that mission, I guess correlation with that would be mission work that churches do. And this is mission season, you'll see the bands of people in the airports with the matching T-shirts and shit. We've all seen that. And they do some good. They get into these in places that are poverty stricken, and they do some good humanitarian work, but it's always with strings attached. And it's always laden with guilt to convert. And so it's not purely humanitarian, and it's not purely altruistic. Its design, again, is to convert people to the faith. So while they do some good things, I think the greater harm that comes with that is the indoctrination. So I don't know if you can say the good outweighs the bad. I think it's just obviously better to do the good work without the ulterior motives.
Well, and on top of that, they often stand in the way of I can't obviously speak to the specific group that you work with, Anton, but very often they stand in the way of secular charity, right?
Yeah.
So I live in a town where my wife and I have looked for opportunities to do volunteer work. It's virtually impossible to do so without supporting a church in this area. I finally did find one charity, but like after a year of looking, I found one charitable organization that I could work with that's not directly affiliated with the church. Very often groups refuse money from, like, I know American Atheists, when they do service projects, very often have charity groups refuse to work with them, refuse to take donations from them. We do an annual fundraiser with my podcast called Vulgarity for Charity, where we raise money explicitly from Christians, but we do it for causes that don't necessarily only benefit Christians. We raise money for people in poverty without asking what religion they belong to. But it took us quite a bit of effort to find any charity that was willing to work with us in doing that work as well. We raised an enormous, like, we were coming to people with showing them how much money we'd raised in the past and said, look, we can raise, at least $150,000, $200,000.
Yeah, it's enormous. I've seen those fundraisers you do. They're huge.
You've raised that much money?
Absolutely. Yeah, we've raised, when we do it this year, we'll go over $1 million that we've raised all together. If it's anything like that,
I need to get some tips from you, because I do a fundraiser for recovering from religion every year. And this last year we just reached 15,000. But
that's really impressive.
That's nothing to sneeze at, Ethan. But Noah's been doing this for 10 years almost, and he's developed a huge audience, and they respond when he reaches out. So that's to his credit. Yeah, absolutely.
But the point is that very often, like, our charity also, so just one more, not to belabor this with too many examples, Anton, but there's another great example that I often use. There's a friend of mine who lives in Texas. She was homeless once. She started a group that helps out homeless people, because the only group in her area that works with the homeless is a religious group that has a very, like, what did you do to piss God off to be here in the first place thing, right? Like this place, like, from her telling of it, literally refused a donation of new clean sheets for their homeless shelter, because they don't want them to be too comfortable. They still want them to have to go out and want to get out and get jobs, like, as though there's a homeless person in the world who doesn't want to improve their station. No. And so she started her own group, and she's done just yeoman's work since day one. It's a secular group. It's not affiliated with any church. But when she applies for grants, when she goes to the government and says, hey, look, this is the group I'm doing, I'm working with her. When she goes to private groups that support charity groups that work with the homeless, they'll very often say, oh, well, there's already a group in your area that we're donating money to. Well, it's this church affiliated group. They're trying to hog up all the charity work they can take and trying to crowd out other people. So very often it is that these groups are doing altruistic things that like, obviously, if you're planting trees, there's no strings attached to that, right? It's one way or the other. That's a net good for the world. And so very often it is through altruism, but oh, sorry, go ahead, Anton.
Yeah, do you think it's, at least I think so, it's easier to get people to do these good things when there's this fear of God attached?
Oh, yeah.
When you're part of a secular group, I'm finding it harder to get people to, do good stuff just for the heck of it.
Yeah, I mean, if we could attach the fear of God to our fundraising efforts as atheists, we would improve our lot immensely. But yeah, we don't have that. The double whammy of God will reward you if you give to the church or this charity, and God will smite you if you don't. When you've got that double whammy going, you've got motivation.
Right. Well, that being said, like I said, our annual fundraiser raises hundreds of thousands of dollars every year for poverty, and that's without fear of God. So
it's possible.
I think very often, maybe there's something to what you're saying, Anton, but I think very often it's because there are not a lot of opportunities for secular people necessarily to give, but there's not enough catalysts sort of bringing them together and saying, here's a way that you can give sort of in the name of atheism, or while protecting, sort of making sure that your money isn't going to, indoctrination or any of the negative effects that Dave's talking about.
Do you have any tips to give me? Any tips for catalysts?
Well, there's a group, and I'm gonna screw up here because they changed their name recently. They were called the Foundation Beyond Belief. I believe now they're called Go Humanity. But it's a humanist group that works with a number of different charity groups and finance groups that are not using the money for religious indoctrination, or that are not church affiliated. That basically just make sure that if you give money to this charity, it's not going to wind up in Jesus's hands somewhere along the way. And they do really good work, but I know, I don't know what's available in Mexico. I know American Atheist does a lot of really good work helping to connect charity groups and community projects. But in my experience, again, and obviously this is all U.S. centric, wherever you are in the country, if there's a reasonably large city, a city that's big enough to fly in and out of within driving distance of you, there are atheist groups that are looking for people to help them with local charity work, with local service projects. They're harder to find than the religious ones because, we're fewer of the people and they try to crowd us out, but they're definitely out there.
Well, you've definitely shown, Noah, that it can be done, and it can be done successfully. So you're a good example for us to follow in terms of fundraising and charity help and those kind of things. But keep looking for that, Anton. That's good questions and good effort there.
Yeah, thanks for taking my call.
You bet. Thanks for calling, buddy. It's a challenge. It's a challenge, but it can be done. I'd be remiss if we didn't touch on this before we have to go. We've got just a few minutes left, but you're famous on your show, Noah, for your diatribes. That's, I think, what everybody's looking forward to each week. And your latest diatribe was on the fear of death. Mm-hmm. I wanted to touch on that a little bit, if you don't mind. Refresh us, or give our audience, if they haven't heard your latest show. And if you haven't, by the way, folks, you need to tune into the Scathing Atheist each week. It's incredible stuff. But what were you saying about the fear of death in your latest diatribe? Just give us a nutshell there.
Sure. So we recently, my wife and I, a couple of years ago, we moved to Georgia to help take care of her father-in-law. He had renal failure and end-stage lung disease, and couldn't take care of himself. So we've had him staying with us for the last couple of years. He passed away a couple of months ago, and obviously, like, leading into that and in the aftermath of that, mortality was on my mind quite a bit. I imagine that's a feeling, of course, Dave, that you can relate to. And it occurred to me, I actually did the talk that I did in Florida was all about this, that one of the biggest missed opportunities for atheists is that we try to avoid the subject of death, present company excluded, obviously. And that we don't talk enough about, we don't validate people's fear of death very often. When you ask atheists sometimes, like, how do you handle the fact that, not just that you're going to die, but that over time, every memory of you is going to be gone, and nothing that you leave can have any real permanence. Even Julius Caesar is going to be forgotten eventually. How do you handle that? And very often our instinct is to either avoid that subject entirely or to be flippant about it. You see the memes that are like, tacos. Well, how do I deal with death? Tacos. Really good tacos.
Yeah.
Or Mark Twain quote, I had been dead for billions and billions of years before I was alive, and it was no inconvenience, or
right.
Paraphrasing there. And there's a certain amount of value to, I think, just to the ability to be irreverent in the face of death. But I think we do ourselves a disservice when we don't validate that. I think the reason that most people who are otherwise inclined towards atheism cling to religion is because they're afraid to admit that death is an end, that death is permanent. And when we say, it doesn't bother me, I don't, death, whatever. I think, first of all, either they know we're lying, right? In which case religious people and the atheists are both lying about death.
Right.
Or even worse, they think that we're being honest, and then they're inclined to think, well, that must be it. I'm just not brave enough to be an atheist. I don't have that kind of courage that person has to not be afraid of death. And I
mean,
think,
full disclosure, I'm actually still scared of death. Like, I don't think there's anything after it, but death scares the shit out of me.
Sure. It's not just, fear might be the wrong way to frame it, right? Because there's fear of dying.
I think it is. I think it is the wrong way. I think it's and that's what I wanted to touch on, because I've obviously dealt with this subject a lot in the last 3 years. And I think the reality is we're not afraid of the act of dying, because when you break, and this is a thing I've done a lot with groups that I've talked with, is when you break it down, when you truly analyze the act of dying itself, what that is, as we understand it. Now, none of us have experienced it yet, but as we understand it, it's going to sleep and not waking up, essentially. No matter how that happens, you're going to lose consciousness and you will not regain consciousness. There's nothing to fear in that act, because you're not even going to be aware that you didn't regain consciousness. Right. You're not going to go, oh my God, I'm dead. I didn't wake up. Oh shit, now what? That's not going to be a thing. So what we're saying, I think, is we're afraid of not being alive anymore. I remember early on.
Yeah, that's a better way to frame it.
Shortly after I was diagnosed with ALS, I went to a party with some friends, and I remember driving home, and I burst out crying. And I thought, what the hell's going on here? And I just realized I don't want the party to end. That was what I was thinking. I don't want the party to come to an end. I want to keep going. I want to get everything I can out of this.
Right.
And if we look at it that way, the only thing we can do about that is to say, okay, then let's make the most of this motherfucker. Yeah. Let's ride this horse. Let's mash the accelerator down. Let's carpe the fucking diem. And that keeps death at bay, because we're so busy living, we can't really worry about dying. And that's the most feedback I've gotten in the last 3.5 years from my Dying Out Loud work has been that message, if you will, has helped so many people. I don't want to say so many people, but the people that reach out to me tell me that has helped them navigate their lives and look at life in a bit of a different vein. In other words, let me grab everything I can out of this thing and not miss it, not let the moments pass me by. That, I think, is helpful. And if we can now, am I afraid of dying? When I think of what's happening to my body and I see it happening every day, yeah, it's discomforting, to be sure, when I see it getting closer. But what it does, I guess, more than anything, is it causes me to have to double down on my focus of living and making sure I don't leave anything undone, don't leave any conversation unsaid,
right?
Any friendship unresolved, any loved one untouched. Yeah, death is coming for us all. What I call it is, death is nothing more than the natural result of living. And if we look at it that way, it's really nothing to fear. So I guess we already said it, but it's not so much you're afraid of dying, you're afraid of not getting the most out of your life.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I've learned anything from you, Dave, it's that I should start dying right now. That
exactly.
I should embrace it as soon as possible, because at some point I'm going to sit there and think, man, I had an opportunity to make more of this time. As Christopher Hitchens said, as he was dying, he said, it's not so much that the party is coming to an end, it's that the party is going on and I'm being shown the door. Yeah.
That's exactly the feeling. And I don't want to miss any of it, because I love life and I love interacting with people. I love doing stuff like this. But when it comes to when I can't do this with any kind of quality, then I'm ready to turn the light off and say, you know what? we gave it a good run. And I guess the other thing to respond to what you said, Noah, about, people are going to forget us. Yeah, they are in a sense, but we can leave stuff behind. All these shows you've done, Noah, that's a piece of you.
It's always going to be there.
The snapshot of who you are as a human, that'll be there for generations, for whoever wants to access it.
It's amazing how close or how accessible immortality is to us now.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if you could go back and listen to imagine that 7 or 8 generations, assuming that we don't burn the whole damn earth down with our improper stewardship, but 7 or 8 generations from now, when the internet has been a thing the whole time, social media, imagine, is still around, when you can go and watch your great-great-grandmother's YouTube videos, when you can read your great-grandfather's tweets, when you can see the band that your mom played with in college, you can see their live shows, you can see what music she listened to. Imagine what grieving will be for the generations beyond us. Yeah, it's pretty cool to think of.
Yeah, I mean, in our past, you had to go look at a grainy home movie that was just a terrible quality, or some photographs in an album. But now we have, the shows you've done, Ethan, they're there, and the shows I'm doing, the book I wrote, the things we create, I guess you could say. So if I guess we could say, if folks are worried about being forgotten, which I don't know why we would worry about that anyway. I guess that's our ego. We don't want to be forgotten, but create shit, man. Write letters. Write letters to people you care about. Write letters to your kids, your grandkids, your parents, your brother, your neighbors. Write a journal that you leave with someone.
And there also, are ways. Don't get too caught up in how many people are listening.
Exactly.
If a dozen people are listening to your show, that's fine, man. Maybe thousands will listen to it years later. Maybe you'll be discovered, by your great grandson and brought to prominence. And even if the only person you ever get to talk to is your great grandson, isn't that worth it?
Yeah. And so even if it's just that one person that what you said meant something to and touched and made a difference for, then everything we do is worth it then. Hey, Kelly Laughlin, thanks for letting me help. Well, thank you for helping. Say, you don't have to super chat. You took the show tonight. Thank you so much. We appreciate that support.
Yeah, and if you haven't, remember to like and subscribe. And if you're not a patron, become a patron. Link in the description. Additionally, if you can't, support the show financially, you can help in other ways by taking this link and sharing it on your Twitter, your Facebook. Every little share and and tweet makes a difference.
That's great. Thank you, Ethan. Well, Noah, folks know how to find you, but where do we find you, and what do you got coming up next?
Well, check me out on thescathingatheist.com, or look for Scathing Atheist wherever you get podcasts. You can also check me out on God Awful Movies, The Skeptocrat, D&D Minus, and Citation Needed. So I've got a podcast for pretty much every day of the week, or at least the weekdays at this point. We'll keep you busy for quite a while. The next big thing on my schedule is at the end of October. The very best conference in all of skepticism is happening in Manchester, England. That's QED.
You told me that, yeah.
It's a great time. They haven't, of course, done it for years because of COVID. It's finally going to happen again. We're going to be doing a live record of our show, God Awful Movies, there. I've been looking forward to it since the last one, for years now. So if you can make it across the pond to see me there, I would love to see you.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, we will. Hopefully I get to run into you again at a conference again somewhere down the road, but appreciate all you do. You're a busy man, and you're doing great work, and it's been great an honor to have you on. Like I said, you were one of the first podcasts I found after my deconversion. I didn't know a lot of stuff was out there, and I found yours, and you were kind enough to have me on a few years ago when I started doing the Dying Out Loud work, and you didn't know who the hell I was. You said, yeah, let's have this guy. I guess so. Whatever. And I appreciate that. So it really helped me to get my message out there.
Well, I'm glad I could be a help for that. And Dave, thanks for all the work you're doing, man. You're a real inspiration to an awful lot of people, myself included. So thanks for that, and thanks for having me on.
Yeah, we'll do it again, man.
Yeah,
thanks for watching tonight, folks, and that's our show for tonight.
Bye.